Okay, so you see that we went ahead and used a little bit of blue tape to cover up the drain. Not a bad idea. You can also see the 2.5 quarts of grout that we mixed. Basically poured, I don't know, maybe a half of that. And that's all we're going to need. In fact, we don't even need as much as I poured out. But it's a good idea to have more than enough material on the floor. Now, I've found mixing and applying epoxy grout is different than your typical cement based grout. It's a much thicker, gooier, stickier type of grout. So when I mix it, I tend to mix it at a slower pace just because it's so thick and it moves slow. It just seems like I can mix it at a slower pace and still mix it effectively. When I'm using my grout float that you see right here, this is real time. I'm going really slow and just taking my time. That way, when I'm smearing it, the grout is actually pretty much like oozing or being pressed into the grout joints. If I was to go at a faster speed, there's a chance that I could skim over these grout joints and maybe trap some air, which will cause air bubbles. So this epoxy, it's a it's a thinner consistency than what I would typically use if this was a just a typical cement based grout. I typically like to mix that on a thicker side, but with this epoxy, I tend to keep it a little bit on we call it a looser side or a thinner side. And we like to have it flow right into those grout joints right there. And it's really not necessary to keep going over these grout joints over and over. You'll know when these grout joints are full. You'll see the product, the epoxy, kind of, it's hard to explain, but kind of oozing off the surface of the tile, which is telling you that these joints are 100% full. And that's what you really want. You don't want to trap any air whatsoever with this. And really, even though you see me working at a slow pace here, it really doesn't take but a few minutes to apply this stuff. Now, if you're a little concerned about getting the epoxy on the shower walls, you can go ahead and take some blue masking tape and mask off the walls. Um, I don't typically do that. I try to apply this stuff as neat as possible. I definitely don't want to make a mess and get this stuff on the walls because then I just have to scrub it off. I just finished grouting the walls just moments before creating this video, so the grout on the walls is still wet, and I know that as long as I'm careful, it shouldn't be a problem. Even if I get anything on the walls, I know that I can still wipe it off. It's really not a big deal. But again, if you are concerned, yeah, definitely take some blue tape and run it around the perimeter. That's fine. It doesn't hurt. You could do it either way, but it is important to run that blue tape on the drain just in case some of the stuff or you accidentally drip some of this inside that drain. This stuff gets rock hard, and you don't want to create any problems. And that brings up another note. Whenever you're washing your tools or anything like that, or that bucket of water that's going to have grout residue, you do not want to dump your wastewater down any plumbing. I mean, toilets, drains, anything like that. You really need to take that stuff outside. Find a place that's you know, maybe some dirt or rocks, or dig a hole and dump that stuff. You don't want to dump it in the gutter, out in the street. You don't want to dump it on your grass. It just it'll leave a mess out there. This epoxy stuff will create a film, and it's just it's not good. So just keep that in mind. All your cleanup, make sure do not dump this stuff down the drains. In fact, you shouldn't be dumping anything like paint or any type of grout or any chemicals down drains at all. That's not, those drains, your plumbing is not meant for that. So back to the video. Just like you see me in the past, I like to use these green epoxy sponges. I believe they have them in orange as well. They work good. I just like the green ones. I can get them here locally. And I do like to use warm to hot water. And like you seen in the video just a moment ago, you know, there's water on that floor. I definitely use water on that floor to help. That's what helps scrub the grout, the residue off the surface of the tile. And if you look closely, you can see right there how much water is on that floor. It's much different grouting epoxy than it is cement based grout. If you were to do this with cement based grout, you would dilute the grout so much that it would become so weak. There's a strong chance that it will have lost all of its strength and do what some people may refer to as sugar cubing, which is basically a term meaning if you were to, it's like a sugar cube. If you could just squish it with your fingers. There's no strength there. Well, the grout can, cement based grout can do that as well if it's mixed with too much water, or if it's washed with too much water. So there is a big difference between grouting cement based grout and epoxy grout. Epoxy, you do want to use water. You need that water. That's what's really scrubbing all of that residue off the surface of the tile. Here, what I'm doing is I'm just focusing pretty much on trying to scrub that residue off the surface. I'm not really paying attention to the grout joints, trying to make them perfect or shape them or anything other than just scrubbing the excess off. I'm not using a lot of force. You can see I'll rinse my sponge just a couple of times, and then I'll take my microfiber towel you see right there, and I'll go ahead and I'll rinse that in that same bucket of water. Wring it out fairly dry. And then now it's just a matter of just wiping up all that excess. The stuff's super easy to work with. I think it's extremely easy. It's not as easy as cement-based grout, that's for sure. But I tell you what, it's such a better product, especially for shower floors. I mean, you've got that, 99% waterproof. It's just as waterproof as tile. That's what I like to say. You never have to seal it, and it's not going to crack in the corners. So you're not going to have to use a silicone or a caulk or anything. It's, I don't know, if you want to call it maintenance free, you don't need any fancy cleaners to maintain this floor. Hot water and a rag, that would work. If you have a brand new shower floor, it's really easy to maintain with this epoxy. And you'll notice that the shower floor actually dries out between uses. And even if you use it on a daily basis, you're going to find out when you step into your shower the next day or the next morning, your shower floor is dry. Another thing you'll notice is when the shower floor gets wet, the grout doesn't get dark. And what that means is the water's not getting absorbed into the grout. A typical cement-based grout as it gets wet, it gets dark. So you know it's soaking, the water's getting soaked into the floor and it goes under the surface. And that's when we start having issues with shower pans getting waterlogged and mold and mildew issues. If we keep the water on the top, then we're good to go. So that's it, guys. One final note, you're going to want to make sure and leave this shower floor dry for 3 days before you start using it. Thanks again for watching.